Hello and welcome to episode 29 of the Movie Bros podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Duncan, he's Hayden.
Hello.
And again, if you're new, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. This is the podcast where two brothers watch a movie, take notes, banter, discuss, ramble, argue, do bits about movies, and then we post it for you fine folk. We post these once a week, usually somewhere around Sunday, so look for that. This podcast is on Spotify, where you most likely found it, but it's also on Amazon as well as Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, whatever the term is. It's also on Instagram, so it's at @the_movie_bros. If you want to get in touch, that's also where we share what was posted, what's going to be posted, movies that we're interested in, etc., etc. Yeah, that's kind of more or less what this is at the top. Anything else do you think I should add before we just get into the movie that we chose, or the movie that was chosen for us? Let's make that clear. This weekend?
Well, to be fair, I feel like this is just based upon its online reputation. I would have watched this eventually anyways, but we do have a randomizer that it will choose from, and it decided to give us Stalker, the Russian experimental movie from 1979.
Yeah. I've seen stills from this that are always like kind of at least interesting. Several people have recommended this. Yeah, I would say I knew it was gonna be more art housey, like not obviously action based, but I would say, I don't know, more not high hopes, but more like, oh, I'm gonna at least have my interest kept for.
Well, we may be jumping ahead a little bit.
We'll
Why don't
talk.
we run
Yeah,
through some film
why don't you
facts,
do
and
that?
then we can get into our mutual underwhelming of
How
this.
about it?
So, our fast film facts today. Obviously, this movie is called Stalker, released in 1979, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. And if you know his name, you know him from things like Solaris. He's well known, and his name is held up in high regard by people in, film circles and things like that. People in general really like his movies. And I'm just going to go ahead and preemptively apologize to our Russian audience for the way I'm going to pronounce some of these names, because I'm giving it my best shot, and I might do a couple different takes and see which one sounds the best. So, this is based upon a novel called Roadside Picnic, and that was written by Arkady Strugatsky. Is adapted by the director Andrei Tarkovsky, and as well as the original novel's, I assume, son and or brother. I didn't actually look. Named Boris Strugatsky. Music here is by Eduard Artemyev. Cinematography is by Alexander Knyazinski. This stars Alexander Kaidanovsky, Anatoly Solonitsyn, and Alicia Fridikic. That's not correct. That can't be correct.
It is what it is, man.
And Alicia. Well, I'm trying not to sound unintelligent. And also stars Alisa Friedendilk. Fuck it. And that's all I have for fast film
Free
facts.
to duck?
It's not Frida Duck.
Free to duck, mom.
But I don't. It's not Frida Duck, but I don't know how to pronounce it. We're just gonna leave it.
All right, that was excruciatingly painful to listen to, and let's.
I'm sorry.
And now let's get into it.
I'm sorry. If that was excruciatingly painful to listen to, boy, was this excruciatingly boring to watch.
Yes, this was a 2 hour and I think 48-minute movie. I think was it something like that, and boy, do you feel every minute.
And I will say that it starts out fine. Like, the premise itself is interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
and then it never really lands that premise in any interesting way.
not really. I mean, yeah, it was cool that it was kind of. It gave me like a combination of like Chernobyl, but also like, for some reason, it made me think of like 1984, like dystopian. I don't know why, but it did.
Just the way that it opened, and the way that they were like not using their real names and things like that.
And like even the opening scene when it's just him leaving the house, like interesting lighting, interesting shots. Okay, this is something. I don't know about the like mutant child who may or may not have powers to move shit, or if it's just
Oh yeah. Well, again, that's thrown in at the very
yes,
last
yeah.
possible
Well, they
second. It's like the final shot
yes.
of the movie, like the kid moving a glass around with its mind. Why? It adds absolutely nothing to the
Well,
story.
again, they reference it in the very beginning really lightly because I think there's stuff on the table that shakes, but they're like, oh, it might also be the train that's going by or whatever. And yeah, and then they also reference
I
it at
just
the
I
end.
just I just assumed it was the train.
Well, again, because they're not super clear, because they're like, oh, maybe he got the radiation or whatever from the zone, or I don't know. It just also like kind of cool concept about the whole zone about granting innermost desires and uh,
So why don't we explain the concept of the movie before we continue just to dump on it?
I don't know if we're necessarily
Because in
dumping.
in I will.
Okay, all right.
Well, okay. Well, maybe I won't, but it's just
I wouldn't. I don't really want to. A, I don't think you and I would explain it as well as it probably should be. But also, B, if you have any interest in watching this because it is such a quote unquote classic, I don't know if I'd want to try to explain too much and then fuck up the experience.
I'm perhaps less forgiving because I felt like my time was wasted.
Fair.
So, without revealing the ending or whatever, essentially, this is set in a
Dystopian future, sort of.
kind of historical, like, sort of like it's kind of a fantasy, right?
Yeah, it felt like like a fantasy post like World War kind of vibe in like a
Yeah.
decrepit country.
Well, I mean, it was Russia before the Berlin Wall
Y-
fell. It probably wasn't that great.
Hey, you never know, dude. Could have been the
I
best
suppose
time.
I wouldn't. In any event, so there's essentially three main characters in this movie. We never learn any of their names.
Well, one of
It's
them is,
Stalker,
but
the writer, and the
and they
professor.
do reference Porcupine.
Yeah, but I mean, like characters we actually
Sure.
see.
Okay. I'm just also not even real name either. So
No, and they're not using their real names because they want to have plausible deniability of if they're caught, because of what they're doing. They're essentially trying to sneak into something called the zone, because it's argued about in the movie, but essentially they believe that either there was some kind of like scientific experiment gone wrong or a meteorite fell, one of those two, and it transformed the environment. And it's sort of like in a radioactive exclusion zone, and the government's trying to keep people out. But the theory is that if you can go in there and make it through like the desolate like forest wasteland, you can go to a magical room
called The Room, by the way.
just called the room in the zone. Super creative, guys. And it will grant you a magical wish to make you happy.
Well, to specifically, I think it was grant your innermost desire.
Yeah, something like that. And it's about these three characters journeying to quote unquote the room and arguing about various philosophical ideas about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Which, on its surface, that's not an uninteresting concept.
Yeah. I wonder. I was.
But
I was.
the way that they did this was just so
I
slow
was
and
thinking
boring.
like, okay, let's imagine it's not. What was this? The 70s? When did this come out? Okay.
79.
Imagine this is not 79. It's like 2019 and this movie came out. Would that have made a big enough difference with just production value? Would that have saved it?
Absolutely.
Because part of this, I feel like I wonder if it's just because it's of its time that it's limited.
So,
Because there's a lot of parts like just it feels like, oh, this is not from this has been a release for a while. Like it doesn't feel modern at all, which that's not inherently a
no.
bad
And,
thing.
and, and that's okay sometimes.
Exactly.
So I say yes to that simply because there's a lot about this movie that reminds me of the Alex Garland movie, Annihilation. It's a very similar concept of a group of people traveling into a strange unknown land and being changed by that experience. It's just that one is so much more. I mean, even if it wasn't filled with the CGI stuff that happens in that movie, even if that wasn't there, I feel like that just handles that situation and scenario in such a more interesting way that it's done here.
Agreed. There are lots of similarities. And while even that movie, it's not my favorite by Alex Garland or my favorite sci-fi movie or anything like that, but like, yes, at least it was both visually and like conceptually interesting enough to Warner keeping my attention. Whereas this, like, this was such a like I explained this to you several times, Hayden, but to the audience, like, this was a struggle for me to finish this movie.
And it was a struggle for me as well, but I kept hanging on, being like, okay, they're gonna get to the room and something interesting will happen, or they'll have like a breakdown of discussion, and like they don't even go in the room. I was so pissed. Like there was like 10 minutes left of the movie. We finally get to the room and they all decide, oh, I'm not going in. I don't believe
Nah.
it's real. Yada yada yada. And they just sit there, and then it cuts to them like a month later and they're all just talking about random bullshit, drinking beer. Just like, what did we just go through 2 hours and 40 minutes for?
Yeah, it did seem like a waste, to be honest. And again,
Yes.
I think maybe if I wonder if I watched this with someone who has watched it and likes it and could like not walk me through it, but like to a certain degree walk me through why it's actually worth it while we watch. Maybe, but
Maybe
I
so.
also feel like a movie. I mean, this is just me personally, but I don't think a movie should have to have like a guide to watch it and actually like it. I'm not saying movies have to be
Yeah,
super spoon fed, but like, I don't know. I feel like if I need to watch like a
I
tutorial
yes,
video or
I
something
agree.
on it just to understand it or enjoy it, no, pass.
Yeah, and on some level, if I have to have someone hold my hand and explain what's going on in the movie, either A, I am not smart enough to understand it, or B, the movie is not doing a good enough job at communicating its ideas.
Which, like, that's why at first I had some real problems with Tenet, the newer movie from Christopher Nolan. However, I did watch it a second time, and the second time, because I had at least some prior knowledge from the first time, it was way, way better. I like it. No, again, it's still not my favorite, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. That's why I'm wondering if I watch this again after some time, maybe with someone else. I don't know.
I kind of have a similar. I don't know if I still enjoy it, but I think I respect that movie more now that I've seen it a handful of times to where I can actually, enjoy what's going on instead of trying to understand
Wait,
everything.
I
Because
thought
I
you hadn't
think
seen that one.
I've seen it like twice
Oh,
now,
okay.
on just on my own
Sure.
time,
I just didn't
and
realize you had seen
I
it.
still don't like love it, but there are definitely moments and aspects of it that I really enjoy. It kind of feels like Nolan's most jumbled movie, just in general,
Yeah,
which I know is kind of part of the plot, but it's just like
it's
if
not that
if
it's
I don't know what's going on at any one point in this movie, maybe you should just make something a little bit more linear.
it's not that it's jumbled. It's just I don't. Yeah, it doesn't strike the balance of interesting and like conceptually cool to capture your attention, but also digestible. Because I feel like he has. I mean, this. I know we're getting off topic, but this podcast has rambles. Who gives a shit? I feel like he has like a spectrum of like understandability, where like maybe on one side
Yes.
is Tenet and maybe sort of Memento, whereas like,
Yeah, I remember Memento confusing the hell out of me
dude, the
when I
first
first
time I was
saw
like,
it.
what the fuck am I watching? Uh,
Yeah, it's like Tenet and Memento on one side, and then the other side you have something like Batman
exactly.
Begins,
Like Batman
where it
Begins is
is
very
like,
super linear, very straightforward storytelling, which I mean, it's still very
which,
good.
don't get me wrong, still good, but like that is the
Hmm.
easiest to consume. I think of his is there's less to try and
Yes,
digest there.
and Interstellar is more on the interesting, confusing, and then like Inception is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. In any event, back to Stalker.
Anyways, back to the movie we don't really care about yet.
um. Well, granted, we're both reading off of Word documents that we compile as we watch. How many bullet points do you have?
Like two or three, which I've already talked about. Whereas some of the lighting and uh, cinematography choices, how it made me feel like this was like a Chernobyl kind of vibe. And oh my god, this movie is so boring. That's literally, I think, all I wrote.
I have six, but they're all like one sentence. So I'll just clip through some of my thoughts here. Um, there's a line in the opening where they're standing in the bar originally, and they're going over their code names, and they're saying, "Oh, we want to be sober for this experience. Go drink beer instead of vodka." And I thought it was funny that they don't see beer as alcohol, and that's actually a fairly common distinction held even today in lots of places where it's seen more as like water. Let's see. The sound design in this was super weird. Everything that isn't like a voice line has a twangy reverb stuck onto it for some reason. Like whenever they're stepping on a broken piece of glass, it sounds like a banjo. Very strange. I don't know why. It doesn't help the experience. It just sounds weird. Uh, so this kind of does a like a Wizard of Oz thing where it starts out in a sepia grayscale, and then once they cross into quote unquote the zone, it switches into color. And I thought that's kind of a cool idea. I didn't hate that. But then it didn't really stay consistent towards the end because they're now out of the zone, but it's back in color. So I don't know why they chose to do that in the beginning and just not do it at the end. Seemed weird.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, maybe it's not exactly about where they're at. Maybe it's more about like their mindset. I don't know. And like,
Maybe
or it's
so.
just maybe it's just an easier marker of them pre versus post experience. I yeah, it didn't
Sure.
feel super needed.
I liked it originally when I thought that it was just to show the difference between the zone reality and quote unquote our reality, but then they didn't do that consistently, and so I was just confused. There are actually a lot of nice shots in here taken in a vacuum. Like if you didn't know what you were looking at, I do like the way a lot of this looks. Like it's shot competently a lot of the time. I just wish there was more of substance actually going on in the scenes. Like lots of the scenes where the writer is making his way through that long tunnel to the final door. That's cool looking,
Hmm.
but also that that sequence takes 10 minutes and it's just them walking through a wet tunnel. Nothing is
Yeah,
happening.
there were several times where I'm like, okay, scene's still going. Got it. All right. Okay.
Yes, there is lots of. It didn't feel like anyone was editing at any point, or maybe this was intentional, and maybe I just don't get it. But it seemed like there was at no point anyone was shouting cut. I see. I already mentioned about the similarities to Annihilation,
Hmm.
and then my final two bullet points are both my rating and that this is held up as well as a few of his other films, Tartovsky. I mean, it is held up as like a deep philosophical movie, and I will fully admit that I am not perhaps the deepest, most philosophical guy out there. So this is rated highly all over the place, and perhaps maybe I just don't get it. Maybe there is something here that I don't understand, and I will fully accept that. If someone if you love this movie as a listener, come down into our comments after listening to this and please let us know why. And what are we missing that you enjoy? Because I would love to know what it is. I would always like to know more about what other people enjoy about the things that I don't.
Hmm.
But I fully didn't feel like any part of this landed to me.
A, ditto. B, I even tried like when I was kind of prepping for this podcast because again I was like, oh shit, I don't really have a ton to say about this. When I was Googleizing at this, because I'm a I Googleizer, as Zoolander might say. Yeah, so much stuff where like, oh, there's themes of this, and there's it's a deep thinker about this. I'm like, dude, I got none of that. So yes, I definitely agree that maybe it's again I don't know if it's just my background, if maybe I just need to be older and watching this to make it more impactful.
Maybe
I don't
so.
know.
So I think a lot of things that were holding I think both of us back is that this is not in English. I think if a lot of this was in English, maybe it would come
Maybe.
across more. I think the language barrier plays a part. I don't think it plays all of a part because I can think of movies that are not in English that I had more of an impact on me than
I
this.
mean, I
But
immediately think of
I'm
Parasite.
sure it would have helped. Sure, there are some conversations in this movie Stalker, which I did actually enjoy. I liked the back and forth they have at the end, even though I felt underwhelmed by the ending. I liked the idea that when given the opportunity to, essentially talk to a magic genie and have that genie grant your wish, you would chicken out about that, and you would start to doubt whether or not it was real. I like, that's not a terrible idea, but it didn't mean that much to me. Well, let's end off Stalker with some ratings. What do you think about it?
Let's see. Let me see what I rated it on Letterbox. Which, if you don't know, folks, Letterbox is basically like IMDb, but sort of social media. It's how to track your films, review them, look at your friends. It's sort of not terrible actually. I gave it a 1.5 star. So I said, visually there was plenty of nice moments, but wow, was that at a snail's pace? Maybe I'll circle back to this eventually, but it just didn't hit for me like it seems everyone else enjoyed it as much. Enjoyed it more. So
I don't have a letterbox. To me, that concept doesn't click as well for me. But what I have written down here is that this is a 2.5 out of 5 for me.
two and
It's
a
right
half.
down the middle. Well, I say that as so there are plenty of nice things to look at. I think we can both agree that there are the cinematography here can be very interesting, but this works as like a screensaver
Mm-hmm.
or something like there are plenty of nice things to look at, and there are sometimes an interesting line or conversation, but it moved like a glacier, and then I felt like my time was wasted. And that's not the same thing as other movies that are equally as long. Like we mentioned Interstellar earlier. That's a long movie, but there is enough happening to where I don't feel bored, and I felt super bored watching this.
Yeah, I think I mean, I think we have similar opinions about both this and Interstellar. So I think, yeah, we're on the same page for it. Just because it's long doesn't mean it has to be boring. Like, yeah,
Yes.
there's yeah, I think again, I'm done.
And again, just my final acquiescence here. I will fully understand that perhaps I just don't get it. So again, if you are a listener and you really enjoy this movie, please enlighten the both of us. We would love to know what you enjoy about it.
With
Now
that,
we're gonna full
let's
break on from Stalker
yeah,
here. We're gonna do something
let's
else.
let's do uh let's do icebreaker audio. That's where we kind of talk about something non-movie related, just so you, the audience, kind of understand who we are as people, and that way maybe you'll understand why we come to the conclusions about movies that we do. Since if you have background lore on the old Duncan and Hayden, the old movie bro hosts. And Hayden, what's our question for this week?
Okay. Do you think you have a good work-life balance? Why or why not?
Well, if my bosses, yes, plural, are listening, then of course I do. I love the balance that I have with my jobs. Uh, in all honesty, I'd say it's much better than it used to be. This is something that, especially, was a big push for me in 2024. Yes, I know it's technically 2025 now, but just looking back, for
We're not even a week into the new
yeah,
year. It's still fine.
for many years, it was like, oh, I can't do that thing. I have to work. Like I was more of a because I did really like the work I was doing, but it was like, oh, I'm doing like 60 hours a week every week kind of thing. So no, I did not have very good
Yeah,
work life balance. So a lot of 2024 was saying no to making more money, but yes to a spending money, but also actually enjoying my time. So yes, now
that's good.
it's not exactly where I want it to be yet, but I think it's better by a lot. I'm actually getting to do things and like having time off to go on trips or have the balance of not super crazy long days to like have a dog or things like that that I've always really wanted. So yeah, I'd say it's better but
Okay,
not
that's
perfect.
cool. That's
You?
cool. I only have the one boss, but I would say it's mine's pretty good. I'm actually looking to maybe pick up another half shift of a different position, but as it stands currently, I'm at work at 8:30, and then I'm out of work at 5:30. So I literally work a more or less a regular 9 to 5. So I have weekends off. It's I can't complain as far as that respect. I can find other things to be mad about, but my work life balance not one of them.
That's good. Unrelated, separate question, I guess, but I don't know why this came up at one of my jobs today, and this became like a hot button issue that like everyone discussed the entire day. I don't.
Oh,
Again,
geez.
I was very innocent. I was not trying to stir up anything. I just asked a like general question. What?
The more like trying to prepare me for this topic, the more it sounds like you were not
Oh no,
innocent.
it's not. And again, the question's not even that like sinister. I was just like, okay, what do you consider camping? And apparently, everyone had different opinions.
What?
Oh yeah, that's what I again. I thought I was very innocent, but Hayden, what do you think camping is?
Do you want like a pedantic like dictionary definition of what camping is, or like what I
What you
personally?
personally, because again, that was one of the ways that some people went was pull up a dictionary, but a lot of people had other ideas. I'm just curious.
To me, camping is you are in a
Okay.
tent, you are not hooked up to electricity. I mean, granted, you probably drove to the campsite, and that's fine. That's what I'm gonna essentially describe what I did for my last birthday. I went and camped and had some nice peace and quiet for a good weekend. It was very enjoyable, but I think it's you are in a tent, you're in a sleeping bag of some variation, you're building a fire, you're cooking your food on said fire, or perhaps you have some kind of a propane stove. You're packing your stuff in and out of that car, and then after you're done with your camping space, you clean things up and you leave. I personally don't really think that if you go in a motorhome and you have a TV and you have heated blankets and all these hotel room esque comforts, I don't think that counts as camping.
I mean, I agree. There's what we were talking about, like the Venn diagram of like what is camping, what is glamping. Do RVs count? Do a yurt count? What about a cabin or an Adirondack? Uh, some people are really into, instead of using a tent, using a like uh, specifically a camping hammock, which has like insulation to it,
Okay,
supposedly.
so I guess I would change my answer to be like camping means you bring whatever it is you're going to be staying in. If you go someplace and the structure, whatever it is already there, I don't think that's camping. I think you have to put up whatever it is that you're going to be staying in.
So let's say it's. Uh, I don't know. We don't need to get into this. I think there's enough time that I've given this, but
That's fine.
no, I was curious because it
We have
became.
all the time in the world.
Boy, I've had a long day. I've been doing things. Anyway, I was just curious. So, folks, if you have any inclination of weighing in on this question or about your work-life balance, let us know. But that has been Icebreaker Audio section, whatever you, or chapter or segment. I don't know, whatever Riverside, the like podcast portal that Spotify uses, calls it. From there, let's go back into movies and talk about anything we either just watched or are going to watch or looking forward to watch.
Well, why don't we swing through the things we watched recently?
Yeah, Hayden and I have watched, I think, 3 movies recently that are either together.
3 movies
Yeah.
together, yeah.
Well, we started with Shin Godzilla, which Hayden owned. I think, if granted, if you listen to our previous episode, we literally talk about it. Um,
That's true, and I would also say that you can hear Duncan talk about these things in relatively the same amount of detail, but in a more isolated way on his other podcast. Duncan, what is that?
That's true. That's true. That's Dunk's Movie Corner or Dunk's Movie Corner Pod. I can't remember. I think it's Dunk's Movie Corner Pod on Instagram, but if you just look on Spotify for Dunk's Movie Corner, I think it's just a quick little. They're usually like 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of just, hey, this is what I watched this week and my quick thoughts on them and my ratings. And yes, I referenced all the things we're about to talk about, including Shin Godzilla, but uh, Hayden likes it a lot. I liked it. I didn't love it. There is a lot of
So
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I so I got given Shin Godzilla as a gift from one of my friend's husbands because he really loves Godzilla. I mentioned liking Godzilla in like kind of an offhanded way, and he decided to give them to me as a gift. Which Braden, that's very nice of you. Thank you. If I never told you at the time, but I'm sure he did. In any event, I don't know that I love Shin Godzilla on a rewatch. I remembered liking it, but I remembered all of the Godzilla portions. I'd forgotten just how much talking there is in that movie.
Yeah, that was almost. I mean, again, in some because I referenced this in my podcast, but in some ways I liked it and it was impressive because it really showed like how much layers of red tape and bureaucracy there is for actually making things happen in government. Granted, that is
Sure.
very specific to uh, Japanese government, but it was. I think it was like a right on like a 2 hour mark movie. I think, and
Yes, it was 120
yeah,
minutes.
and I think 100 of those minutes was just talking and moving, and maybe 20 of them were Godzilla doing cool gods. I mean, the Godzilla stuff was dope, but there just wasn't enough of it. That's all.
Yeah, and I wanna say that that is a cultural difference, and all of the Japanese, Godzilla stuff is that way, and maybe it's just that we're American and we don't understand it in the same respect, but, like,
Fair.
kind of in the same way as Stalker, I was bored and kind of just waiting for it to
Well, I
end.
was definitely bored, dude. From there,
So
well, well, actually,
that was Shin
yeah,
Godzilla.
from there,
From there, we went and we watched, the Doug Liman version of Roadhouse.
which if you've seen the original with Patrick Swayze, very different vibes. Uh, there's so many points in the original where there's not much actual like bar fights or anything that really. There's a lot of him doing like yoga and tai chi shit, like next to a pond with like the sun setting and some girl with like crazy big hair is fawning over him. Either
Yeah,
either way, uh,
this is not that.
not at all. Which again, I don't think this is going to win any Oscars, but I honestly really enjoyed this. I think it's such a fun movie. It's a bummer that it
I had a good
it's a
time.
bummer that it didn't get a theatrical release, but I mean, at least it was released at all.
Yeah,
Something I think about is
there
like,
was shady Amazon politics
well,
going on.
yes, but I also think of like at least it's not Batgirl that like the whole Warner Brothers one that like basically was made and then they're
Wrote
like
off as a
nah,
tax write-off.
which is bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, you have a completely finished movie that only needed
Yes,
post-production, and because Warner Brothers was and is continuing to hemorrhage money, they're gonna be like, "We're gonna cancel this and write it off for tax reasons,"
yeah, they're pivoting. Yeah.
which is unfortunate.
Either way, back to
I
yeah.
liked it. It was fun. Um, I would also say that I didn't love it. There are certain points where I didn't really buy it, but
Sure.
I don't know. It was decent enough. It was comedic and actiony enough to
Hmm.
where it was entertaining.
Yeah. Again, it wasn't like ridiculous. There wasn't okay. There was a few bits of like action where I was like, all right,
Oh,
okay,
there's especially towards the final fight. There's a lot of
yes,
quite literal jumping of the shark.
yes. But before that, like the good visuals, some of the fun music, like I like most things that Jake Gyllenhaal does. Um,
Yeah, he's a pretty good actor.
yeah. Again, I don't think he's my favorite actor, but like I can't really think of anything that I've overly disliked him in.
I will say, you had seen this before. I had not. Um, and before he like takes his shirt off in the opening scene where they throw Post Malone in for no reason,
Yeah.
um, I was like, I've seen Jake Gyllenhaal in other movies. I don't know if I would buy that he's like super strong in this. Then he takes his shirt off and he's like the most ripped I've
He's
ever seen him. The
super
dude's
ripped, dude.
ridiculous.
Super fucking
Like
ripped.
dude's ridiculous in this. I mean, granted,
Conor
Conor
McGregor.
McGregor, who he stars opposite again, is literally so muscular he can't raise his arms down past a certain
Well,
point.
the thing is, like, Conor McGregor is less. Well, he looks more like an actual fighter. Jake Gyllenhaal looks more like a bodybuilder. He's a lot more defined.
Kind of.
Either way, yes. Um, there a couple of this like there's a very funny side character. Like he has more lines than maybe a side character should have.
Oh, the henchman who was just there to have
Yes, yeah,
fun.
he's just a funny henchman. I was like, oh, I love
Yeah,
this.
he's yeah.
The bad guy, who like the bad businessman, who whatever that Conor McGregor sort of works for, horrendous haircut. He is.
Yeah.
If you recognized him, it's one of the guys from Game Night, as well as oh god, I can't place it now. Oh, he was in the newer James Bond as like a turncoat, uh, person for, I think it was MI6, or maybe it was the Americans.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't.
that's true.
I only saw that movie once. I would like to see it again.
Oh, No Time to
Yeah, I would
Die.
watch that again. Dude, Anna de Armas. Oh my god.
Mm. Well, I mean that is a lot of the reason. Um, and the French actress Leia Seydoux, I'm a big fan of.
Uh, uh,
To each their
okay,
own.
all
To
right.
each their own. Um, Pivoting again to a completely different kind of movie, we also recently watched the new Wallace and Gromit.
It's Vengeance Most Foul or something like that. Yeah.
Yes, foul as in a pun because they bring back Feathers McGraw.
Yes, it was a lot of fun, but the whole like gnome thing, I don't know. I didn't I didn't like it actually. I felt it was
Really?
I felt it was too advanced technology for or for Wallace. Like
You know what? I'll actually buy that.
it
That
didn't
that makes
feel
sense.
inventory. It felt like, yeah, I get maybe it's more 21st century, but it didn't feel right to me. For it did make me definitely want to A, rewatch the other shorts, and B, it definitely made me see if I could somehow play the original Xbox
Wallace
game.
and Gromit Project Zoo.
Yes, that game was freaking awesome, and I would super. I mean, I don't know how it would work, but I would be down to try to.
It looks like you can find emulators online
Uh,
of the PS2
eh,
version, but I don't know how that would
yeah,
work.
okay.
But I agree that was a very fun game. And I kind of see what you mean with the Wallace and Gromits. Wallace's inventions have always been like the hokey big glove on a metal arm
Yeah,
doing things, and not so much something you plug into the internet and has a musical number.
yeah. I did not like the musical number.
Seemed weird and out of place. I would also say that Feathers McGraw, while yes, he is present at all points in the movie, doesn't feel like the villain because so much of it is the gnomes.
Yeah, that's also
Like
true.
he
Yeah,
only
he.
really becomes the quote unquote main villain at the end on their like uh little boat chase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely feels almost like two movies, or at least like a part one and part two.
Kind of. But again, I did still like it. You know, it's cute, it's fun. There's a lot of good visual humor, but it doesn't feel the same as the original three. And I don't know what one thing to put my thumb down on and say, oh, this is the reason, because Robot Gnomes still feels like a very Wallace and Gromity kind of thing. It's just the way they chose to do it doesn't feel like it fits.
Oh, I think the gnome. Yeah, sure, the gnome part fits, but yeah, not the like intelligent gnome. Granted,
Yeah,
I
I
am
don't know.
glad they still are making them, so I mean, I'm still gonna watch it, but yeah, I think we
Yeah.
both agree. What would you rate Wallace and Gromit though?
Oh, Vengeance Most
Mm-hmm.
Foul. It's like a 3 out of 5. I liked it. I didn't love it,
Same,
as we just
same.
say.
What about Roadhouse?
Probably the same actually. I liked a lot of aspects of it. I didn't love it.
Okay,
Um, I would probably recommend it to other people, but I wouldn't, you know, be campaigning for it at like award ceremonies or
yeah,
something.
fair. And Shin Godzilla?
I'm torn on that. I don't know. Because maybe it's just like a cultural thing and it's not for me, kind of like with Stalker, like we just talked about. Maybe there's just something I don't understand. Because I know that it's very much for a Japanese audience. But for me personally, it's got to be a 2 out of 5. Like, the Godzilla parts are cool, and I love the fact that it's a guy in a suit and then they do a whole lot of like CGI stuff to enhance him, and that looks great. But that's barely even a quarter of the movie's runtime.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything coming out that you are perhaps looking forward to?
Not, I mean, there's not a ton coming out. I'm not really. I mean, there's not a ton coming out in January. I think in February. I think that's Captain America: Brave New World, but I don't even really care about that, to be honest. Like, uh, I don't know.
I mean, I can quickly Googleize as we say, but we don't have
No,
to.
it's okay.
For me personally, I know Paddington in Peru is coming out later this month, but that's kind of the only thing I'm looking forward to. I own the first two Paddington movies, absolutely love them, but I know that this is not an interest shared with you, so I'm not going to drag you along to watch
I
this.
mean, I've seen the first two and I liked them, but I know that there is like a weird sub part of the internet where people are like, "Holy shit, Paddington 2."
Well,
I
I
don't know.
mean, they are special to people for different reasons.
Sure.
Well, let's go ahead and spin the picker wheel, and we can figure out what we're watching next time.
All right, it has spun Master and Commander, which is the period piece set on the high seas with Russell Crowe.
During the Napoleonic Wars,
Yes,
with Paul Bettany as
that's
well.
true. Yeah, around the Galapagos Islands and all kinds of cool ship battles and sword
It's
fights, and
it's a regular juggernaut of a movie. There's a ton going
it's really
on,
good.
and we can get into it next week.
If you want to watch it, I don't know if it's available anywhere, but I would say, hey, Google it.
You
If
know what?
not,
Let me quickly look. I'm gonna say I physically own it, but I'm sure it's streaming some. So it's available on Max.
all right. So it's on Max if you want to watch it. Otherwise, that'll be coming roughly next Sunday. We'll see how again timing works because life happens. But
Life happens
yeah,
sometimes.
we'll catch you all for episode 30, which is crazy that we've done almost 30 hours of recordings, more or less. I mean, maybe more,
Yeah,
maybe I don't know where we're
we've
at, but yeah, new year, new episode. Hopefully, everyone enjoys it. Hopefully, we can move on from Stalker as quickly as possible, and we'll catch everyone next week.